The year 2746 marked the moment when the Galactic Hegemony, an alliance of over 50 advanced alien species, made the fatal mistake of underestimating humanity. For centuries, the hegemony had ruled the known galaxy with an iron grip, using its superior technology, vast fleets, and brutal enforcement to maintain order. Humanity had only recently earned a seat at the galactic table, but they were treated as little more than a minor species, useful as traders, explorers, and colonists, but hardly a military power worth acknowledging. The hegemony believed that their advanced energy-based weaponry, cybernetic warriors, and impenetrable defense grids made them untouchable. That illusion shattered when the Zalvani Empire, one of the hegemony's most militaristic members, attempted to annex the outer Terran colony of Bastion 4. The attack was supposed to be a simple show of force, a quick strike to teach humanity its place. What they didn't anticipate was that humans had been preparing for war in ways no one could have predicted. ###the Battle of Bastion 4. The Zalvani fleet, bristling with plasma lances and shielded dreadnoughts, warped into Bastion 4's orbit with overwhelming firepower. They broadcast an ultimatum: surrender, or be annihilated. The response from the human governor was simple, an open transmission that played across the entire system. Come and take it. The hegemony commanders scoffed at what they perceived as human arrogance. Their fleet descended, deploying wave after wave of shock troops, expecting little resistance from what they assumed were barely militarized settlers. What they found instead was a bloodbath. Humanity had long been dismissed as a lesser force, but they had a secret, kinetic weaponry. While most galactic species had moved entirely to energy-based arms, humans had perfected railguns, hypervelocity cannons, and solid-state munitions. Their weapons didn't fizzle against energy shields like hegemony plasma bolts did, they tore through ships and soldiers alike with raw, merciless physics. The first wave of Zalvani invaders found themselves caught in a hurricane of metal and fire. Hypervelocity rounds ripped through their ships, kinetic bombardments shattered entire formations, and human infantry, clad in exosuits and armed with rail rifles, tore through their ranks with ruthless efficiency. They had expected a slaughter. They got one, just not the way they had planned. ###A shocking defeat. As the Zalvani forces retreated, reeling from their unexpected losses, the humans pursued. Unlike the slow-moving, hierarchical fleets of the hegemony, humanity's forces adapted, learned, and countered in real time. They moved in wolf packs, their ships designed for agility and precision strikes rather than lumbering shows of force. The Zalvani commander, Lord General Walter Kann, was forced to make a desperate decision: retreat and face disgrace, or call for reinforcements and escalate the conflict. He chose the latter. Across the galaxy, the hegemony scoffed at the reports. A minor border skirmish had gone wrong, but surely it was a fluke. Surely the full might of the hegemony would crush humanity once and for all. They had no idea what was coming. The Zalvani defeat at Bastion 4 sent shockwaves through the hegemony. Never before had an established member species suffered such a humiliating loss to an upstart race. In their arrogance, the ruling council dismissed the battle as a minor setback, attributing it to poor leadership and human luck. But Lord General Walter Kann, now disgraced and desperate to redeem himself, knew better. He had witnessed firsthand the devastating efficiency of human weaponry, the terrifying reality of kinetic projectiles that ignored energy shields, the ruthlessness of human tactics, and worst of all, their sheer adaptability. He pleaded with the hegemony's high command to take the threat seriously, to deploy overwhelming force before humanity could build momentum. The council scoffed. They would not waste their main fleets on a primitive race. Instead, they sent a punitive force, 3 hegemony battle fleets, composed of ships from multiple allied species, including the Zalvani, the insectoid Kryzak, and the amphibious Darvath. It would be more than enough, they assured themselves. They were wrong. ### The ambush at Kepler 62F. While humanity was still technologically behind in some ways, they had one advantage no species in the galaxy had ever needed to develop: war was in their blood. Most hegemony species viewed war as an unfortunate necessity, fought in controlled engagements with careful strategic calculations. Humanity, on the other hand, thrived in conflict. They studied war like an art form, drilled their soldiers relentlessly, and used every tool at their disposal, no matter how underhanded. When the hegemony fleets entered the Kepler 62 system, an expected weak point in human defenses, they found nothing. No military presence, no planetary shields, no signs of occupation. Then, hell rained from above. The humans had mined the entire asteroid belt. Not with energy-based traps, but with stealth-coded kinetic kill drones, silent, invisible to standard hegemony scanners, and programmed to detect specific energy signatures. The moment the first battleship entered orbit, thousands of hidden projectiles launched from the surrounding asteroids at relativistic speeds. Entire capital ships were torn apart in seconds. Plasma shields, designed to absorb and dissipate energy-based attacks, were useless against hypervelocity tungsten rods. Frigate hulls, built for electronic warfare and command coordination, crumpled like tin cans. Hegemony forces scrambled to retreat, but the moment they tried to jump to FTL, their own fuel depots exploded. Human cyber warfare had sabotaged their drives before they even knew they were being hacked. Panic spread across the Armada. They weren't fighting a disorganized militia. They were fighting a predatory species, one that had studied them, anticipated their moves, and turned their strengths into weaknesses. Within hours, the hegemony lost 2/3 of its punitive fleet. The remaining forces fled, their shattered ships limping back to friendly territory, bringing with them only one message. Humanity is far more dangerous than we believed. #escalation. News of the slaughter at Kepler 62F shattered the illusion of hegemony and vulnerability. The ruling council, for the first time in centuries, faced something it had never encountered: fear. The humans had not only won a battle, they had made a statement. They were not prey. They were not servants. They were warriors. For the first time in its history, the hegemony declared total war. A grand coalition fleet was assembled, **500 warships**, led by the best admirals and strategists from across the member species. Their goal was simple: wipe humanity from the stars. But as the war machine moved, humanity was not idle. Earth's leaders knew what was coming. The hegemony would stop at nothing now. And so, they prepared for the next phase of war. The war that would change the balance of power forever. The hegemony's declaration of total war galvanized humanity. For the first time, all of Earth and its colonies stood united, pooling their resources, knowledge, and technological advancements into a single, all-encompassing war effort. The task ahead was unimaginable, against a coalition of hundreds of species, with fleets larger and more advanced than anything humanity had ever seen. But humanity had one thing the hegemony could not replicate: a burning resolve to survive. The new fleet of Earth, now dubbed the Terran Vanguard, consisted of an unprecedented 1,000 ships, each designed with the lessons learned from past engagements. The ships were sleek, swift, and terrifyingly powerful, outfitted with devastating kinetic weapons, advanced cloaking technology, and cutting-edge AI-assisted tactical planning. They were also outfitted with something else: deep space mines, weaponized viruses, and a series of traps designed not only to defend but to draw the hegemony forces into a deadly maze. The hegemony fleet advanced, unaware of the storm that awaited them. Their commanders, overconfident and complacent, never anticipated the full scale of humanity's preparations. But as they neared the inner colonies, they began to sense something was off. #the Battle of the Caldera Rift. The first real confrontation between the two forces occurred at the Caldera Rift, a strategic choke point in human space. It was here that humanity would make its stand, forcing the enemy to come to them, into the perfect trap. The hegemony's fleet moved forward in a staggered formation, confident that their overwhelming numbers would wipe out anything the humans could muster. As they entered the rift, they were greeted with a strange silence, an eerie stillness that only heightened their unease. Then, the war began. Thousands of drones, previously hidden within the debris of the rift, erupted from their concealment, launching a torrent of kinetic bombardments at the lead ships. The Terran vanguard had outsmarted the enemy by creating a kinetic minefield, a dense array of stealthy projectiles that struck the hegemony ships at near-relativistic speeds. But that was just the beginning. Humanity had not only studied hegemony tactics, they had infiltrated their networks. The virus embedded within the drones wasn't just designed to destroy ships, it was programmed to hijack enemy systems. For the first time, the hegemony faced an opponent capable of hacking their most sophisticated weaponry in real time. Human drones commandeered hegemony ships, turning their own turrets and shields against them. Fleets that had once seemed invincible were now shattered and disorganized, their most advanced vessels reduced to scrap. The hegemony commanders, once filled with disdain for their inferior enemy, were forced into retreat, their pride now a crumbled shell. But the battle was not yet over. ###The final gambit. The hegemony's high command, realizing that their entire fleet was on the verge of collapse, called for a massive, all-out counterattack. They brought every available ship to the front lines, deploying their deadliest weapons, self-replicating drones, energy-charged plasma cannons, and unstoppable assault dreadnoughts. The hegemony was going all in, knowing that victory or defeat would be decided in a single confrontation. Humanity, knowing the full scope of their enemy's final assault, made their own preparations. A new weapon was unveiled, a colossal supercarrier known as the Sol Invictus. This massive ship, once a mere experimental design, now held humanity's last chance. Within its core were 6 quantum disruptors, capable of destabilizing the space-time fabric itself. The Sol Invictus was a gamble. If it succeeded, it could wipe out the hegemony's fleet. But if it failed, it would annihilate everything in its vicinity. The final battle, dubbed the Clash of the Gods, began as both fleets collided at the edge of the Alpha Centauri system. Humanity's forces, now outnumbered but fiercely determined, poured all their remaining strength into the fight. The Sol Invictus took the brunt of the assault, absorbing wave after wave of plasma fire as its disruptors powered up. The enemy came closer. Humanity held its breath. Then, with a deafening roar, the Sol Invictus fired. A shockwave of energy spread across the battlefield, destabilizing hegemony ships at the quantum level. The fabric of space itself twisted, and entire fleets disappeared in flashes of brilliant, chaotic light. The hegemony's pride, their largest and most formidable ships, were reduced to smoldering wrecks. Humanity had won. The universe had gone silent. The explosive crescendo of the Clash of the Gods had left a deep void where once thriving fleets had stood. The hegemony's once indomitable war machine had been reduced to wreckage, and the collective military might of its coalition had crumbled. Humanity had stood on the brink of annihilation but had emerged victorious, though the cost of this victory was not without its scars. As the dust settled across the battlefield, humanity's leaders convened in a newly constructed war council on Earth, amid the ruins of the Sol Invictus. The destruction was catastrophic, but in its aftermath lay a truth that could not be ignored: humanity had altered the galaxy's power dynamics forever. The Terran vanguard had suffered immense losses, thousands of ships, countless soldiers, and entire fleets had been wiped out during the conflict. But humanity had proven its greatest strength in the face of adversity, resilience. They had rallied from the brink of extinction, adapted, and won. Now, with the hegemony in disarray, it was their time to reshape the future. ###The hegemony surrender. The high command of the hegemony, decimated and humbled by their losses, was forced to the negotiating table. Their fleets had been broken. Their pride had been shattered. With the collective might of their coalition in ruins, they were now at the mercy of the humans. A peace summit was arranged in neutral space, aboard a station far from any homeworld. The representatives of the hegemony arrived in a mix of caution and bitterness, accompanied by their fractured military leadership. They had no choice but to acknowledge humanity's supremacy. At the summit, the humans made a singular demand: an official dissolution of the hegemony's rule and a redistribution of power throughout the galaxy. The vast territories once controlled by the hegemony were to be restructured into a new coalition, with humanity at the helm. The hegemony would be relegated to a secondary status, no longer the controlling force they once were. The alien delegates, some defiant, some terrified, grudgingly signed the Treaty of Seoul, marking the beginning of a new era. The balance of power had been shifted beyond recognition. ####The emergence of the Galactic Confederation. In the wake of their victory, humanity established the Galactic Confederation, a multi-species government that represented the new order. At its head was Empress Dahlia Vasquez, a human leader who had become a symbol of humanity's strength and resolve. She was not a military leader, but a political one, chosen for her wisdom in diplomacy, vision, and ability to unite disparate species. Under her leadership, the Confederation sought to rebuild, not just the power of humanity, but the entire galaxy's fractured political structure. Humanity's rise was not without its challenges. Many former hegemony members resisted the change, unwilling to relinquish their previous dominions. Others, however, saw the wisdom in aligning with humanity. They had been spared annihilation, and while they were no longer the undisputed rulers, humanity had demonstrated that they were worthy of leadership. The Confederation's first order of business was to rebuild the galaxy's infrastructure, trade routes, communication networks, and military alliances. Humanity's advanced engineering capabilities were utilized to restore systems devastated by war. Yet, there was more than just reconstruction at hand. The Terran vision was bold, a galaxy governed by unity, mutual respect, and shared prosperity. But not all were satisfied with the changes. ###The rise of the opposition. While many accepted humanity's newfound role in the galaxy, a faction of disgruntled species began to form a resistance. These were former hegemony allies who believed that they had been betrayed by the humans. They resented being relegated to secondary status, bitter over their loss of power, and unwilling to embrace the new status quo. They called themselves the New Dawn, a coalition that sought to destabilize the Galactic Confederation and restore the old order. The New Dawn began to operate in the shadows, sabotaging human infrastructure, launching covert raids on vulnerable systems, and spreading dissent throughout the galaxy. They believed that humanity had no right to claim dominance and that the galaxy should remain divided under the rule of the older, more established species. Their tactics were guerrilla in nature: sabotage, subversion, and targeted strikes on key human assets. But humanity's rise had also brought about new alliances, and the Confederation was not blind to the growing threat. As the New Dawn's insurgency spread, the Confederation responded with equal force, deploying elite forces to root out their enemies, and diplomatic efforts to heal the wounds caused by the war. Still, the tension remained high. As humanity forged a new future, a shadow of conflict loomed. Would the galaxy accept this new order, or would the flames of rebellion rekindle and throw the galaxy into another endless war? The New Dawn insurgency was relentless. Despite the overwhelming power of the Galactic Confederation, the opposition knew how to strike at humanity's weakest points. Their tactics were brutal: hit-and-run attacks, assassinations of key leaders, and attacks on human-controlled infrastructure across the galaxy. It became evident that the victory at the Clash of the Gods was not the end of humanity's struggle for supremacy, it was only the beginning. Humanity had proven that it could win battles, but now they would have to fight an entirely new kind of war. This wasn't a war of ships and weapons, it was a war of ideals, a contest of whether humanity's vision of a unified galaxy could hold in the face of division, hatred, and old prejudices. ###The reigniting of old tensions. While the Confederation sought peace and prosperity, the New Dawn's leaders, mainly high-ranking former hegemony officials, used the galaxy's vast information networks to spread propaganda. They painted humanity as conquerors, using the war's destruction as evidence that the Terran vision was built on the bones of other species' histories. They argued that the old power structures should be restored, that the galaxy's natural balance had been disrupted by human interference. Across the galaxy, the hegemony's former allies, species like the Zalvani and the Kryzak, began to stir. While some had accepted humanity's new leadership, many others clung to the old ways. They sought alliances with the New Dawn, promising to return to a time of dominance and privilege. There was a growing undercurrent of dissent, one that threatened to ignite another war, but this time, it wouldn't be a war between armies, it would be a war for the very soul of the galaxy. The Confederation was forced to respond, but they couldn't simply crush the new dawn through force. That would be playing into the insurgents' hands. Instead, the Confederation pursued a diplomatic strategy, sending ambassadors, philosophers, and diplomats to the most agitated systems to rebuild trust, negotiate peace, and offer shared opportunities for progress. But as the diplomats worked tirelessly to broker peace, the shadows of war still loomed. The Battle of the Andromeda Spiral. The turning point came at the Andromeda Spiral, a critical hub in the galaxy's communication network. The New Dawn, emboldened by the support of several alien factions, launched a devastating assault on the Confederation's communications infrastructure. The attack crippled multiple systems, throwing entire sectors of the galaxy into disarray. The Confederation's fleet was too far away to respond in time, and within hours, entire planets were cut off from the central command. Humanity could not afford to sit back and wait for the enemy to strike again. The Terran vanguard had been reformed, stronger and more advanced than ever before, with new technologies and weaponry designed to respond quickly to the New Dawn's guerrilla tactics. In the wake of the Andromeda assault, the Confederation deployed the Ironclad Expeditionary Force, a fleet of heavily armored warships designed for deep space combat. They made their way to the Andromeda Spiral, prepared to engage in what could very well be the defining battle of the galactic struggle. When they arrived, they found the New Dawn's forces entrenched in a series of orbital fortresses and planetary defense stations. The space around the Andromeda Spiral had become a battlefield, and the Confederation would not be able to reclaim it without a fight. The Battle of the Andromeda Spiral was unlike any other. The Confederation's fleet, now armed with devastating new weapons, quantum disruptors, gravity bombs, and plasmoid torpedoes, moved in with precision. The New Dawn's forces, though outnumbered, fought with ferocity and cunning, using guerrilla tactics to turn the tides of battle. The fight was brutal and unforgiving, with the stakes higher than ever before. But humanity, in the face of overwhelming odds, proved once again that it was a force of nature. With the leadership of Admiral Cassius Devereux, a decorated war hero known for his unshakable resolve, the Confederation secured a hard-fought victory. The New Dawn's strongholds were dismantled, their leadership captured or killed, and their forces scattered. The battle was a decisive blow to the insurgency, but it was far from the end of the conflict. A new era of diplomacy. In the aftermath of the Andromeda Spiral, the Galactic Confederation realized that the galaxy could not be held together by force alone. There would always be factions that resisted change, always those who sought to maintain the old ways. The Confederation's leaders knew that they had to offer something beyond military might. Empress Dahlia Vasquez convened a council of species leaders, both those loyal to the Confederation and former hegemony members who still resisted. The goal was clear: unite the galaxy under a banner of cooperation and shared prosperity. Humanity's war for supremacy had redefined the balance of power, but now it was time to secure a lasting peace. The path forward would not be easy. The New Dawn still had many supporters, and the scars of the war ran deep. But humanity's vision of a new, unified galaxy, one where differences could be respected and shared resources distributed equitably, was beginning to take shape. The future of the galaxy was uncertain, but one thing was clear: humanity had earned its place at the table, and now, it was time to build something that would last. The victory at Andromeda Spiral had solidified humanity's position as the de facto power in the galaxy. The Galactic Confederation had begun to stabilize, and the New Dawn insurgency was on the brink of collapse. However, peace was still fragile. Beneath the surface, old wounds festered, and the seeds of rebellion and resentment were beginning to sprout once again. While the battlefronts had quieted, the political landscape remained volatile. The species that had once dominated the hegemony, Zalvani, Kryzak, and Darvoth, had reluctantly accepted their subordinate position, but they did so with growing bitterness. The new order was not one they had chosen, but one that had been forced upon them. And as the months wore on, this simmering resentment would find a voice. The rising tide of dissent. on the fringe of Confederation space, a movement began to form. The Phoenix Coalition, as it called itself, was born from the ashes of the New Dawn. Unlike their predecessors, the Phoenix Coalition didn't rely solely on military tactics. Instead, they used ideology as their weapon. They argued that humanity, in its bid to unite the galaxy, had become a new empire, and that the Confederation was nothing more than a thinly veiled dictatorship. Their message was simple: freedom over unity. The Phoenix Coalition's leaders were former high-ranking hegemony officials and sympathetic species who had long been marginalized in the New Order. They claimed that humanity's dominance was the end of diversity, that under the banner of peace, the galaxy was becoming homogenized and controlled by human interests. The Coalition's appeal spread across systems where tensions were high, places where the Confederation's vision had not been fully realized, where economic inequality and cultural suppression festered. The Phoenix Coalition started small, with scattered protests and underground movements. But soon, these pockets of dissent began to coalesce into a full-scale insurgency. They infiltrated government institutions, spread propaganda, and conducted sabotage operations against human infrastructure. While the Confederation was focused on rebuilding the galaxy's fractured political systems, the Phoenix Coalition struck swiftly at its weak points, disrupting trade routes, assassinating high-ranking leaders, and calling for an independent galaxy free from human rule. ##### A threat from within. Empress Dahlia Vasquez was aware of the growing unrest, but she had hoped that the rise of the Phoenix Coalition would be nothing more than a passing storm. She had led humanity through the war, through the period of turmoil and rebuilding, and her diplomatic efforts had gained the support of many species. But she was beginning to see the reality of her position: the galaxy's unity was fragile, and the old wounds of species pride, cultural identity, and distrust were far from healed. The illusion of peace that had been carefully constructed was starting to crack. The Phoenix Coalition's leader, a former Zalvani general named Ronkar, emerged as a charismatic figure who quickly became the symbol of the insurgency. He was a skilled orator, and his speeches about freedom and self-determination resonated with those who felt betrayed by humanity's new order. Ronkar argued that the Confederation had become just as oppressive as the hegemony, only under a different guise. It wasn't just about the old regime, it was about humanity's unchecked ambition to dominate. And if humanity truly wanted peace, they would have to give up their control. Ronkar's words spread like wildfire, and within weeks, entire colonies and systems began to pledge their support to the Phoenix Coalition. The Confederation's intelligence services, which had once been unrivaled, found themselves struggling to keep up with the sudden surge of rebellion. In a matter of months, the Phoenix Coalition had become a galactic threat, operating openly in several systems, with both military and civilian support. They weren't just fighting for territory, they were fighting for the soul of the galaxy. #### The Battle of Tiburon Station. The tipping point came when the Phoenix Coalition launched a coordinated assault on Tiburon Station, a key trade hub and communication nexus in human-controlled space. The attack was swift and brutal, with a mix of guerrilla forces infiltrating the station and launching sabotage operations. Within hours, Tiburon Station was under siege, and communications with the rest of the Confederation were cut off. It wasn't just a military strike, it was a symbolic one. Tiburon Station represented everything the Confederation had built: the prosperity of trade, the unity of species, and the freedom humanity had promised. By seizing it, the Phoenix Coalition struck at the heart of human authority. The Confederation's fleet responded, but the insurgency had a trick up its sleeve: a new type of cyber weapon that crippled the fleet's ability to communicate. The forces on the ground were unable to coordinate with their ships, and the battle turned into a chaotic firefight. The Phoenix Coalition had planned this carefully, and their forces, composed of both military veterans and disgruntled civilians, fought with a fury fueled by their desire to return to the galaxy's natural state. The battle for Tiburon Station was long and bloody. It was humanity's first major defeat since the war with the hegemony, and the galaxy watched as the once mighty Confederation struggled to maintain control. The fight ended in a stalemate, with both sides suffering heavy casualties. But the message was clear: the Phoenix Coalition was no longer just an insurgency. It was a revolution. Hashtag a galaxy at the crossroads. The galaxy now found itself at a crossroads. The Confederation had proven its strength in the past, but now, its unity was being tested in ways that no one had anticipated. Humanity stood at the precipice. Could they maintain control, or would the dream of a unified galaxy be torn apart by the forces of division? As Empress Vasquez sat in the war room, staring at the galaxy map, she realized that humanity's greatest challenge had only just begun. The peace they had fought for was under siege, not from outside forces, but from within. And this time, victory would require more than just military might. It would require humanity to find common ground with the very species they had fought to protect, and confront the darker side of their own ambition. The galaxy was at a tipping point. The Phoenix Coalition's revolution had torn through the heart of the Confederation, and the fragile peace that had been so carefully cultivated was beginning to crumble. Empress Dahlia Vasquez stood at the center of a maelstrom, her authority challenged not just by external forces, but by her own people and the very ideals humanity had fought to uphold. The galaxy was on the verge of civil war, again. This time, it wasn't the old powers warring for dominance, it was humanity's vision of unity being torn apart by the very species it had hoped to bring together. Hashtag the rise of the unseen enemy. As the Phoenix Coalition's influence spread, it became clear that the rebellion was not simply about freedom, it was about something deeper. The insurgents had united not only under the banner of resistance but also under a new philosophy. This philosophy spoke of galactic sovereignty, the idea that each species, each system, and each individual had the right to shape their own destiny without the interference of others. They rejected the idea of a centralized government, one ruled by humanity. They wanted a galaxy where no one species could claim supremacy over the others, even for the sake of peace. But beneath this surface rhetoric, another force was working. The Shadows, a mysterious faction, had infiltrated both sides of the conflict, manipulating events from the shadows, playing the Phoenix Coalition against the Confederation, and stirring up deep-seated fears about humanity's growing power. They saw the galaxy's transformation as a threat to their own existence, and they sought to ensure that no one species, least of all humanity, would ever control the galaxy. The shadows had always been there, watching, waiting. And now, they were pushing humanity toward the brink of annihilation, hoping that the resulting chaos would give them the opportunity to step into the light. Hashtag the Council of Species. As civil war loomed, Empress Vasquez knew that there was one final chance to save the galaxy. Humanity's strength had always been in its ability to adapt, to unite when it seemed impossible. She called for a Council of Species, a gathering of leaders from both the Confederation and the Phoenix Coalition, along with neutral parties, to find a path forward, one that didn't involve more bloodshed. It would be a summit like no other, and its success or failure would determine the fate of the galaxy. Representatives from every species gathered in neutral space, aboard the ancient station known as Unity's End, a place where old alliances had once been forged. Empress Vasquez knew that this was not just a political gathering, it was a test. The galaxy was looking for a leader, and if humanity failed, it would be the final sign that their dream of a united galaxy had been nothing more than a fantasy. Hashtag the Great Betrayal. The summit began with a fragile optimism. At first, the talk seemed to be making progress, with both sides acknowledging the pain and loss that had been endured. But as the hours wore on, it became clear that the Phoenix Coalition's demands were unrealistic. Ronkar, the insurgency's leader, made it known that humanity's control over the galaxy was unacceptable. He argued that even peace under human leadership was a form of oppression. And then came the betrayal. As the council deliberated, the shadows made their move. They launched a coordinated attack on the summit, assassinating key delegates and sabotaging the fragile communications network that had brought the representatives together. Chaos erupted on Unity's End, and the galaxy was plunged into darkness once more. The shadows had used the council's peace process to further their own agenda, ensuring that no resolution would be reached. In the aftermath of the attack, as the galaxy once again teetered on the edge of war, Empress Vasquez made a decision that would alter the course of history. She called for a final stand, a grand military campaign that would not only crush the Phoenix Coalition but also eliminate the unseen threat of the Shadows once and for all. The fate of the galaxy would be decided by force, but it would also be a test of humanity's resolve. Was this the price of peace? Was the galaxy ready to accept humanity's rule in the name of stability? Or would they rebel, casting aside the vision of unity for the chaos of the past? #The battle for the soul of the galaxy. The final confrontation took place in the heart of the galaxy, at the Crucible, an ancient battle site where old alliances had been forged and broken. The forces of the Galactic Confederation, bolstered by human might, clashed with the Phoenix Coalition, supported by scattered remnants of the Shadows. It was a war to end all wars, a battle that would define the fate of the galaxy for millennia to come. Humanity's strength, honed through years of conflict, proved decisive. The battle raged for days, with each side losing ground and gaining it back in a brutal back-and-forth. But as the Phoenix Coalition's leadership was crushed, and the Shadows' hidden forces were revealed and eradicated, it became clear that the galaxy's future belonged to humanity, not through domination, but through a shared commitment to unity and stability. #The New Dawn. In the aftermath of the Crucible, the Galactic Confederation emerged victorious. But humanity had learned a painful lesson: unity could never be taken for granted. The galaxy had been torn apart by fear, ambition, and mistrust. And while humanity had won, it had done so at a great cost, not just in lives lost, but in the trust of those it had hoped to lead. Empress Vasquez, once hailed as a symbol of humanity's strength, now stood as a figure of reconciliation. The road ahead would be long and fraught with challenges, but it was clear that the galaxy had reached a turning point. Humanity's vision of peace had not been easy, and it would never be fully realized without the cooperation of all species. But for the first time, the galaxy had seen that humanity could bring about true change. Unity, forged through war and tempered by sacrifice, had proven to be humanity's greatest strength. And as the dust of the final battle settled, the galaxy looked ahead, not just to the future of humanity, but to a future where the possibility of peace and progress could exist for all.